What happens at the edge of the world, where the wind never stops and the land offers nothing back? The air is cold, dry, and constantly moving, carrying dust across a horizon that never seems to end. The ground is uneven, scattered with stone and bone, marked by tracks that vanish as quickly as they appear. Far in the distance, something shifts. Animal or human, it is impossible to tell. And yet, life exists here. Today, this is a journey through Patagonia, not as myth, but as lived reality, rebuilt through archaeology, landscapes, and the first written accounts that tried to explain what they did not understand. 7 stops across a shifting landscape, from the first human arrival at the end of the Ice Age, to the moment unfamiliar sails appear along the coast. Each step moves deeper into a world defined by survival. Each stage reveals how that world was built, and how it was misunderstood. Stop 1. The land is still recovering from ice that has only recently begun to retreat, leaving behind unstable ground, meltwater channels, and vast open spaces where nothing yet feels settled. Wind moves freely across this terrain, carrying fine sediment and cold air in a constant low force that never fully disappears. And yet, there are signs of life. At sites like Monteverde in southern Chile, evidence shows human presence about 14,500 years ago, preserved in hearth remains, organic materials, and tools. These groups move along narrow corridors between ice and land, following water sources and animal paths, adjusting constantly to a landscape that is still changing beneath them. One number defines this moment: 14,500 years. It is early enough that survival is uncertain, but late enough that presence becomes undeniable. This is not exploration in the traditional sense. This is entry into a system that, and the question remains, what allows a group to stay when everything around them is still in motion? Stop 2. As the ice retreats further, the environment begins to stabilize, though not evenly, and new ecosystems slowly emerge across the steppe. Grasslands spread in patches, animals move in more predictable patterns, and the land begins to offer opportunities, but never guarantees. Movement becomes more deliberate. Inside caves, such as Cueva de las Manos, hand stencils appear in layered formations, pressed against rock and repeated across generations in a way that suggests continuity rather than momentary presence. These are not random marks. They are signals of occupation, memory, and identity tied to place. One number anchors this transition. By about 11,000 ago, human occupation in Patagonia is clearly established. By this point, human groups are no longer passing through. They are operating within a system they understand, even if they do not control it. Stone tools become more refined, hunting strategies more efficient, and movement patterns more structured. But structure here does not eliminate risk. It only makes survival possible. Stop 3. Over time, the landscape itself begins to separate human experience into distinct paths, creating environments that demand entirely different forms of adaptation. Inland, the steppe remains open and dry, forcing movement across long distances in search of herds and water. To the south and west, the land breaks apart into channels, islands, and cold coastal systems, where the ground is no longer the primary route of travel. 2 worlds begin to form, one defined by land-based hunting and constant mobility, the other shaped by water, navigation, and marine resources. Archaeological patterns reflect this split clearly, with inland sites dominated by stone tools and hunting implements, while coastal sites show evidence of canoes, harpoons, and shell-based technologies. This is not just adaptation. It is divergence. And divergence creates distance, not just in space, but in experience, knowledge, and survival strategies. Two groups may occupy the same region while operating in entirely different systems with little direct interaction. Stop 4. Across the open steppe, movement becomes the defining feature of life, as groups later identified by anthropologists as the Tehuelche develop systems built entirely around mobility and environmental awareness. The land offers no permanent shelter, so shelter must be temporary. The wind never stops, so structures must adapt or disappear. Groups rarely exceed 100 individuals, a size that allows flexibility while maintaining enough cooperation for hunting and survival. Weapons like bolas are used with precision, designed not just for efficiency, but for reliability in open terrain where failure carries immediate consequences. One number defines this system: fewer than 100 people per group, small enough to move quickly, large enough to survive collectively. Knowledge becomes the most valuable resource. Routes, water sources, seasonal patterns, all stored in memory and passed through generations. The peaks of Torres del Paine carry names tied to color, distance, and observation, reflecting a system where language itself becomes a survival tool. To lose that knowledge is not an inconvenience. It is a threat. Stop 5. Further south, the environment shifts into something more extreme, where water replaces land as the primary space of movement, and exposure becomes constant rather than occasional. In Tierra del Fuego, the cold is persistent, the ground is fragmented, and the weather changes without warning. The Yamana move through these channels in bark canoes, maintaining fire even while traveling across water, an adaptation that reflects both necessity and precision. Nearby, the Selknam navigate inland environments, combining hunting practices with ritual systems that structure social life. One defining factor shapes both groups: extremely low population density, likely among the lowest in the world at the time. Not by design, but by limitation. Resources are scarce, conditions are severe, and yet continuity persists across generations. So what changes when something unfamiliar enters a system that has remained closed for thousands of years? Stop 6. The first sign is not visual, but auditory, as wood creaks under tension and sails snap sharply in the wind, carrying unfamiliar shapes into a landscape that has never seen them before. In 1520, the expedition led by Ferdinand Magellan reaches the Patagonian coast, stopping near San Julian during a critical phase of its journey. For the first time, two completely separate systems come into direct contact. The chronicler Antonio Pigafetta records what he observes, describing figures on the shore whose size and appearance seem unusual when compared to European norms. One number shapes perception, approximately 1.8 meters in height, taller than the sailors, but not extraordinary in absolute terms. Perception shifts interpretation. The term Patagones is used, and with it, a narrative begins. Stop 7. Nothing in the land itself changes, but the way it is described changes rapidly as accounts travel beyond the region and into European understanding. Stories expand, details exaggerate, observations transform into interpretations. Maps begin to label Patagonia as a land of giants, reinforcing an idea that becomes more powerful with repetition than with evidence. The name remains, the myth solidifies, and the people who lived within this system for thousands of years are no longer seen as they are, but as something imagined. What begins as observation becomes distortion, and distortion travels farther than truth. So, what exists at the edge of the world? Not giants, not emptiness, but a place that does not explain itself to those who arrive unprepared to understand it. The wind continues to move across the land, and the story changes, depending on who is telling it.